Good evening. My name is Andrew Harris from the Davenport Police Department, and I would like to welcome everyone to the fourth quarter Good Neighbor Project's fourth quarter meeting. We are at the Fairmont Library located here at 3000 Fairmont Street, and we have two very special guest speakers from the Scott County Sheriff's Office. I'll be introducing them shortly, but first off, Allie and I would like to just give a quick update of some things going on in our community. First thing is next month we'll be coming up on our 2-year anniversary of the Davenport Good Neighbor Project, and we're really excited to let everyone know we're up to approximately 85 neighborhoods.
Yep, 85 neighborhoods.
So it keeps on growing, and thanks to you, the word's getting out, and we're looking forward to 2022 and then expanding our neighborhood Good Neighbor Leader Project leaders, and also our partnerships with churches and other organizations throughout the city. Allie, you want to talk a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah, so recently back in October, the city of Davenport launched a podcast called the Davenport Pulse with the communications team. And as of recently, we are up to 620 downloads/listens. You can find this podcast wherever podcasts are made available, so Spotify, Apple, iTunes. We upload it weekly on Facebook every Thursday, so check it out there. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 downloads by January 1, and click that episode, take a listen. We have 8 episodes out currently, 3 of which are Good Neighbor Project related. Tammy Trice was a guest on our podcast, Sergeant Harris, and we also had Tracy Singleton from TMBC
and Officer Carver.
And Officer Carver, yeah, he was on there as well. So give it a listen, check it out, download it. It's good stuff. So.
And then last Friday, we had some special guests.
Yes, we did. Yeah, our friends from Madison, Wisconsin came down. Their original Good Neighbor Project leaders, some of the first leaders that they had in Madison, Wisconsin, came down last Friday and spent the day with Sergeant Harris and myself, and we gave them a tour of the Quad Cities. It was a lot of fun. Tell them where all we went.
We went to Prospect Park, which is one of our newest Good Neighbor Project neighborhoods. They love taking photos of the river and Rock Island Arsenal there. We also had lunch with our Heatherton Good Neighbor Project's leader, Tammy Trice, and Van Buren neighborhood leader, Joyce Miller. Came down to the police department. We had some pizza. We toured 180, Humility and Mary Services, Hope at the Brick House. We had some visitors from Davenport Peace come and talk about everything that's going on with their organization. So it was a fun-filled day, and it was great just ending at the Hope at the Brick House to have some dinner before they got to go back to Madison.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep.
Also, I forgot to talk about the community resource, talking about 2022. We are so excited. We partnered up with Parks and Rec last year, and they were able to get a grant for a community resource trailer. So just be on the lookout here in the next few months. Once there'll be information to reserve that. That'll be exclusively for Good Neighbor Project leaders to reserve that for a few days when you have neighborhood gatherings or block parties and things like that. So that's another fun thing for 2022. And let's go ahead and get started for tonight. Fourth quarter, our guest speakers are from the Scott County Sheriff's Office. And right over here to my left right here is Deputy Anthony Johnson, a good friend of mine. We've known each other for about 2 years. He's been working in law enforcement for over 10 years. He's in charge of the sex offender registry for the Scott County Sheriff's Office. He's also a special deputy for the U.S. Marshals and the Marshals Fugitive Task Force. He's been serving, as I said, for about 2 years with the Scott County Sheriff's Office, and also served 10 years with the U.S. Army National Guard Infantry. And then also to the right is our sex offender registry specialist, Tara. She's been serving for about a year with the Scott County Sheriff's Office. We were lucky enough to get her from the Clinton County Sheriff's Office, where she served as a sex offender registry specialist for over 20 years. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to learn about the Scott County Sex Offender Registry. Often questions come up to us during our neighborhood meetings about why a sex offender is allowed to live close to a pool or a school, and Tara and Deputy Anthony Johnson will be explaining about those different requirements. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting us. We hope that you find this presentation informative. We're very open, so if you guys have any questions for us concerning the registry or anything Sheriff's Office related, we're always willing to answer questions. And I'll have our contact information at the end of the presentation. As Sergeant Harris stated, I'm Anthony, just here off screen there. And our presentation is going to cover what we think you should know about sex offenders. It's kind of an outline of what we're going to be going over. Knowing what to look for, SOR information online, how to notify us if you suspect there's a sex offender violation or you have issues with one in your area, what the registration process is like, and the most common violations that I charge sex offenders with when they are in violation. And then I just go over our resources. So, in the state of Iowa, sex offenders are required to register new relevant information in 5 business days. If they cross jurisdictional lines, meaning they leave the state, then they have 3 days to notify both us and the jurisdiction that they're going into, their state. What is relevant information? It's outlined actually in the 692A code, which is the code that governs sex offenders in the state of Iowa. I'll go into detail. I'll kind of list these quick. If you are unclear or anything, I'll slow down. I'll go into detail. It's kind of hard to see here. First is the criminal history, warrants, articles, the status of parole, probation, supervised release, arrest date, conviction, and the registration status. Their date of birth, passport, immigration documents, government issued driver's license or ID, a DNA sample. If they are attending school, what that school is and its address, their employment and where that is, their fingerprints, names, nicknames, aliases, tribal names, etc. And then there's this right here is for juvenile offenders. They're protected on the registry. Palm prints and photographs. Continuing, their physical descriptors, like there's tattoo scars, that kind of thing. Professional licensing, if they should have professional employment. Where their residence is located, which is most important, public safety, right, where they are. Their social security number, telephone numbers, including landline and wireless numbers. Their temporary lodging information, they're traveling for work or for personal reasons. They need to know where they're going to be staying along the route. Statutory citation and text of the offense committed. So when we have out-of-state offenders, their charge, or the text of the charge may be different from Iowa. We have to know what that is so we can be related to an Iowa charge. Their vehicle information. This is one that actually trips up quite a bit of sex offenders. It is not just the vehicle they own, but it is also one they operate. We need to know about that. And finally, the name, gender, and date of birth of each person residing at the residence. Okay. Seems like a lot of information, but I can tell you during the registration process, the majority of this is captured during the initial registration. A lot of it is in their sentencing documents, prior registrations in other states, if they're new to Iowa, criminal history. Like a lot of that seems like a lot, but really what they regularly change and report is mostly this block right here. Continuing, we're going to tier levels and restrictions. I'll spend a little bit of time on this because the restrictions are a little different. So tier levels are divided into 3 categories. They are assigned due to the severity of the offense of the offender. If you're in tier 1, you have to come into the sheriff's office once a year for verification. If you're 2, it's twice a year. If you're 3, we must see you in person 4 times a year. Now that's different, and I'll go into that later, but that's different from doing an update or a change of relevant information. A verification is assigned upon their initial. They have it quarterly from that initial appearance, and they must appear in those months, but they can do it anytime. So that's essentially in most months 30, 31 days, excluding February, obviously. that they have to come in one time to speak with us for 15 to 20 minutes, usually. Finally, there are 3 major restrictions in the state of Iowa that offenders can be assigned. Those are exclusion zones, prohibited employment, and residency restriction, otherwise known as the 2,000-foot rule. I'll speak on those a little bit. Exclusion zones are assigned if there's a minor who's been offended against. Excuse me. And that would be public libraries here, schools, parks, playgrounds where children are known to primarily use. So like a skate park or a jungle gym, they could be around that. Like a dog park, a little different. So that is what exclusion zones are. They can't be on the real property of those locations, and they cannot loiter on the real property, or I'm sorry, within 300 feet of the real property. So that'd be like for schools, public buildings. They can't just hang around for long periods of times in those areas. Prohibited employment is assigned. So I list these first 2. Jumping back, I list these first 2 because they are most commonly assigned to the majority of sex offenders that we supervise. Prohibited employment is for those it restricts employment where you could be in charge of dependent adults. Again, this isn't an issue for most of our guys because they won't get jobs in those fields anyway. And finally, the least assigned for good reason is the residency restriction, otherwise known as the 2,000-foot rule. And that is, I'm going to have to use my form for this. This is actually a little complicated in how it's assigned. I'm going to try and go over it. So the 2,000-foot rule is assigned to child sex offenders, right? Offenders who offend against a child. It's specific to the offense. It has to be sex abuse 1, 2, or 3. And goes into detail here under what the codes are. But without going into too detailed dive on that, generally it's under 12. But it can, in certain instances, it can be over 12 too. I just most commonly see those who are offended under 12 that will have the 2,000-foot rule. That's kind of a 1,000-foot view. That's one that I still question some of our guys why they have it, or not usually why they have it, why they don't have it. So then I have to talk to the state registry, and she's like, no, this is this, and this. It's kind of gloss over that a little bit. Continuing on, notifying us of suspected violations or issues with sex offenders. Kind of gotten this anyway as I've been in the job, which I appreciated. The public is a big part of why we were able to stay as responsive and proactive as we are. I put our Sheriff's Office contact link up there. You go to the Sheriff's Office main page from the Scott County website. There's a hyperlink right there that you can click, and as long as you put sex offender in the heading, they'll direct it to me and Mr. Holding. So the way we try to help narrow this is if you have questions, absolutely contact us. If there's an issue with registrants and you think the registry may be somewhat kind of close to being violated, please let us know. We'll be glad to reach out and have a conversation with the registrant on that. If the matter is criminal in nature, i.e. like an assault, domestic abuse, OWI, any kind of those situations, we encourage you to still contact the relevant law enforcement agency. So most of us are here in Davenport, that would be Davenport PD. If you're in the surrounding Bettendorf or our small towns, please contact those agencies. If necessary, they'll contact me so I can follow up with an investigation of possible charges. But if the other thing is, if the violation, you're certain it's related to the registry or children are involved, don't hesitate to contact us. We want to be as responsive as we can when children are involved, and also you may contact DHS as well. We work together real well on those kinds of issues. I will say this is just kind of, and actually we're over this number that I'm about to give you right now, but I will tell you that since our short time of doing this now, our population hovers between 480 and 510 sex offenders that reside within Scott County and commute for employment. I think we'll get to it later, but I think it's actually like 512 right now, so we're a little over that. So we do try to be very responsive when we have issues with our sex offenders, but again, it's generally myself and Ms. Bertoli that are tracking and following up on these guys. Although the rest of the Sheriff's Office does actively participate in sex offender compliance, but generally when it comes to charging and investigating, it's going to be me and Ms. Bertoli. So we don't want you to think if your complaint has not been responded to in what you feel a timely manner, trust me, it's being looked at. Knowing where to find SOR information online. So I've included a couple links here. I will tell you that Iowa does provide a public-facing website that gives sex offender information for your area. I will tell you it also doesn't have all the sex offenders on. Due to ages at time of offense, type of offense, they may not be required to be on the public-facing side of the website. They have a web exemption is what it's called. But I still track them, and they're still visible to law enforcement. You just may not be able to see them. There's not that many, so we'll tell you that. Further, if you want to go to Scott County, again, the Sheriff's Office website, we do have resources for sex offenders and sex offender information. There is a residency restriction map on that website. It's very good, I think. I think we're probably one of the better ones in the state, honestly, as far as making that map available to the public and sex offenders. Not to give excuses for the 2,000 footers, but I will tell you, looking at that map, almost all of Lower Davenport up into Kimberly Road is restricted for them. So it's very difficult to find a place to live. Just to give you an idea about that. For the residency restriction map, it is updated monthly. Our GIS guy, our mapping guy, is very good. He's very responsive. We actually have found a couple glitches in the map where the footage is not going where it should. When that's been made aware to me, I've gotten with him, and he can sometimes fix it. Still working the software, but he's a very smart guy. For that issue that was made that I was made aware of out in the clear, we were actually able to fix that same day. So again, the public helping us out. So other resources that we use in our investigations, primary resource investigations is what the registrants give us, right? The code requires them to report on these 21 pieces of relevant information. So if they don't give us something and I find it out on my own, they're in violation. If they give us something that is false, they are in violation. If they don't remove something, technically they're in violation too, although we're much more concerned about like active information and old information. Further, probation and parole officers, both with the Department of Corrections in Iowa and the U.S. Probation Office here at the federal courthouse, are very helpful in coordinating information. A lot of times what we have with registrants is because they have to report to two different organizations, they will largely just go to probation because they look at, you're the person from DOC or Fed prison, you're the one who can put me back. I'll tell you all the information you can tell the sheriff's office. I can tell you for a fact they're always told no. What you tell me, you have to tell the sheriff's office, but many times they don't. Or they give conflicting information too. So our probation officer is very helpful in coordinating with me for charges against those individuals if they're trying to actively evade the registry. And finally, you the citizens, you wouldn't believe how many tips and call-in information, not just to the sheriff's office, but even to Davenport PD that gets passed along to me, has helped us in catching these guys slipping up. Because again, they know there's essentially one guy actively goes out and looks for them outside of the sweeps. You know, they know Tara now is catching on to a lot of their stuff, but again, it's still 2 people ultimately that's finding that stuff. So the public is a great resource for us that is actively giving us information all the time. Actually, just have another investigation that started today based off that. I kind of went over this a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on it now. These are the most common violations that sex offenders make. 692A-104 is the failure to register. It covers 21 pieces of relevant information. The 108, as I mentioned earlier, with their mandatory in-person verification appearances, that governs that. And then finally, 112, which is providing false information, which they can give during verification, or we have harm sheets that we kind of carried over from COVID. So they can do their simple change of information on this hard sheet. They're still interfacing with one of our clerks so we can verify it is the sex offender who's changing this. We give them a copy, they get a copy for their records, and then they also get a copy of the code. That, just so you know, that's how all registrations go, is we take the information, we give them a copy of what they've given us, and then we give them a copy of the 692A code every time they deal with us for registry stuff. So my thought is, if you're getting this law that governs your freedom every time you interact with us, you should probably know it pretty good. And I've even gone into detail with them about focusing on those 21 pieces. You can focus on those 21 pieces and stay current on that. You're going to be good on most everything else. Going back to 108, we try to be somewhat fair with that. I mean, we're not like, on the 31st day on the first day of the new month, we're not going out in droves, just hooking people up, Try to give them a call like, hey, we shouldn't have to be calling you, but you need to get in here, get registered, We're not trying to arrest you if you're just forgetting, but you got 30 days, you should be making it to the sheriff's office for 1 day, or for 15 minutes. I kind of went over the 112. 104 covers all those other issues, vehicles, the address, people living with you, children living with you. Did you cover child endangerment later? Otherwise I'll talk. Okay. Oh. So I'm going to cover this real quick. Part of their registration is there's a child endangerment paragraph towards the end of the registry. And it talks about in Iowa, unless you are biologically related to the children, like they're your biological children, or you are married to their parent, sex offenders cannot reside with children. Recently, in July, there was a change to that code, because before, what would happen is we would be made aware of this through DHS or our own investigation, contact the parent, advise them of this violation, give them a written warning, and be like, hey, if this happens again, we will have to charge you. It's for your child's safety. Now, which I think is much more reasonable, the state has made it to where we can charge both, the sex offender and the parent. So the process for the parent remains the same, right? But for the sex offender, who I always thought, I think most of us would agree, is the person who should already know, right? They're getting the registration, they're getting the information, they should know about their responsibilities. So now the state of Iowa has allowed us to charge them directly for child endangerment should they be residing with children not their own biologically or not theirs by marriage. Trying to keep those kids safe. So that was my piece I wanted to talk about, kind of tagging on to that 104. It's a separate charge, but it kind of goes with that and registering other residents. And obviously, if we catch that in a verification or a regular change of information, and we ask them, hey, what is the relationship to these kids? We always ask about that. And they're like, well, it's my girlfriend's kids. Okay, well, you're not going to live there now. So we don't just, again, we're trying to be fair in our charging. It's not the goal to keep them in jail. The goal is to keep them in compliance and keep the public safe. You want to go over this?
So Deputy Johnson spoke to you about verifications and the changes that they are required to come in and report within 5 days or in their verification month. Sorry. So on this chart in October, we had 12 brand new sex offenders that moved to our county. They were either discharged from DOC, or they moved from Illinois, or they were in prison for another type of charge and came back into the population. Some of those reside at the residential correctional facility for a period of time before they actually go out into communities. In October, we had 112 verifications, so I had 112 appointments with sex offenders. We did 10 patrol or investigation compliance checks, and we had 97 people come in with changes. Either they moved, they got new employment, a new car, a new phone, you name it, tattoos. And we had 3 arrests in October. In November, we had 7 new registrants, 101 verifications. We did 5 compliance checks, 115 changes, and 3 warrants. And then December, today is the, 8th? 7th? So far, I've had 36 appointments, and I didn't count today, because I did this yesterday. 1 new registration, 1 compliance check, 21 changes, and 1 arrest. And then I went ahead and put this on because I didn't feel like the numbers in this fall were even close to what we actually do. Obviously, when the weather is nicer, we're out more, and for some reason, it just seems like DOC releases more, and as the weather is nice, people are not compliant. In August, and that was another reason why I wanted to include this, we did our compliance sweep, and we checked 382 sex offenders. We did home visits, and several agencies in the area came and helped us. We had 6 new registrants that month, 106 verifications, and with the compliance sweep, we had 13 arrests. I think for the August sweep, we were at 7%, so 93 compliant, 93% compliance. So, yeah. So currently here in Scott County, we have 512 sex offenders either residing or they're employed here. We have 1 person in Clinton County Jail, and we have 31 offenders who work in Scott County, but they either live over in Illinois or in another county nearby. And we currently have 22 of our residents that are in jail. So 479 sex offenders live here in Scott County. 101 of those are Tier 1, which is the low risk, Tier 2, 111, and Tier 3, which is high risk, are 263. Of that 479, 4 of them have not been assessed yet. Once they are initially registered, we send that info into state, and they assess the info and decide what their tier levels and requirements are going to be. Of that 479, we have 105 who have the residency restrictions, and currently 15 are homeless.
We are constantly trying to reduce our homeless population. We're putting them in contact with our social services within the county. Just personally, honestly, I know both Tara and I feel this way. I don't like the idea of our registrants being homeless. It's kind of like a little built-in leeway in the system to kind of remain. If you're on the website, but you're not really, because there's no location for you, we require within our, like the registry gives us the leeway to establish processes to ensure compliance. So for our homeless, we require them to come in every 7 days to verify their location for the next 7 days and the times that they will be there. I get it's not easy for the homeless because the idea is you don't know where you're going to live, right? I tell them, I'm like, look guys, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. As a registrant, you don't have the luxury of being regular homeless. Like, you have to have some place where I can find you regularly. You know, again, it's not about them. Unfortunately, it's for the public safety. Types of sex offenders. Incest offenders. They are seeking intimate contact with another person regardless of relationship, age, or vulnerability. Some don't understand or don't care that they are hurting a child. There's kind of a lot that fall within this group. Some views both boys and girls. There's kind of a myth that, well, it's not a myth, there are preferential sex offenders, but in this group you have those that are not preferential. A lot of them appear normal. I mean, a lot of them are sex offenders, you could say that for, especially the ones that are in professional settings. You wouldn't realize what they are. This is one I want to touch on a little bit. We talked about this over summer in training at the Iowa Sex Offender Symposium. We had a very good speaker who has researched sex offenders for, I want to say it's like over 15 years. And one of the things that is a common myth is that most sex offenders are abused. They will tell you they are abused. In this caption, yes, often they are abused, but the number previously was thought to be somewhere in the 80 or 90 range, whereas more accurately closer to 30%. A lot of these guys lie because they're trying to get that sympathy from law enforcement or the judicial system in their sentencing. Many of these types of offenders don't have criminal records, or it's traffic stuff. And many times they are family members, obviously like uncles, aunts, grandpas, and so forth. Pedophiles, adults who offend against children, most hold responsible jobs. They're likely single or living with their parents. Dysfunctional marriages. They can be socially inhibited or extremely charming. Most do not have criminal records. A lot of them will try to work or volunteer with children. One of our guys who is no longer with us tried vehemently to be allowed to participate in a church Easter egg hunt. He was told by Ms. Bertoli that was not going to go. He insisted several times. He insisted on talking to me, and I finally had to tell him, like, no, you absolutely will not do that unless you're okay with me going to your church Easter egg hunt and informing all the parents of your history. That stopped. Obviously, we don't want to stop all community interaction. The goal is for them to rehabilitate, but again, we want to keep the public safe. Sexually violent offenders, these are going to be a lot of the tier 3s. The pedophiles are kind of a split between the 2 and 3s. These include offenders who kidnap, rape, and murder adults and children. This group constitutes the smallest but most dangerous group. A lot of these guys are also in this group. We were actually talking about one earlier today. They will not admit or express remorse for their crime. Many of them are like, I shouldn't even be on the registry for what I did. Many of these guys will have lengthy criminal history, not necessarily in just sex offenses, but in violent offenses. They frequently assault their victims physically. In addition to abusing children, many have committed adult rape, domestics, burglaries, drugs, and are regularly unemployed. I'm going to talk on this one, the victim-offender relationship.
Victim offender relationships, I know, growing up, my parents were always like, stranger danger, don't talk to strangers, they can hurt you, blah, blah, blah. I was scared of them. When you take the numbers and you figure out victims of rape and sexual assault, strangers are only about 8% of those people. 51% are related, 40% are acquaintance and about 8% are strangers. So I found that to be very interesting.
This is going back to that symposium we had over the summer. The speaker really kind of opened a lot of eyes with that. Talking, as Tara mentioned, stranger danger, getting away from that idea and talking to children and kind of like scaring your kids, but educating your children about the threats that are out there. Listening to your children when they're trying to tell you things. Getting away from, this might bleed into the next slide. Let's go to the next slide on top. Getting away from children having pet names or play names for their private areas. Like talking with the children, explaining those parts of what they are. So that if a child is trying to explain to you what has happened, the example she used in the presentation, I was thinking, Uncle licked my cookie or something. And they're like, okay, whatever, Is it the next one? Oh, here it is, yeah. Talk openly with your children about sexual development, behavior, and abuse. Use the proper names for body parts. I can tell you in one of my investigations, watching the forensic interview for one of these children is difficult, but that was one thing through the whole interview. She could not be specific about how she was abused or how she was assaulted, really. She would use private part, So telling your kids using the proper terms helps with identifying issues early, I would say. Tell your children that some children and adults have touching problems, and it's kind of like stealing or lying. Tell your children that if anyone touches or tries to see their private parts, or to look at theirs, that's not okay. They should talk to a person they trust or support person, like you or a teacher. Make sure your children have support people at home, school. Discuss with your child who they are. Know your neighbors. That's a big one. We're here, good neighbors, right?
Yes. Thank you. Good plug. Be a good neighbor.
Supervise all. This is another big one. Supervise all internet activities closely. Discuss not sharing phone numbers, addresses, schools, with someone over the internet. We'll touch on this real quick, and then we'll go back to the next slide. Used to be kind of like a split for my job with sex offenders and what we call internet crimes against children investigations. We now have a specialist detective who is the primary on that, and I am secondary on it. But I can tell you, this is a huge thing. Know what your kids are accessing. Know who your kids are talking to. Your children can be tricked into sending vulnerable pictures, videos of themselves to people who they think are other children, right? So a case in point, being as vague as I can, one of our registrants was used, one of our registrants was used as the fall guy for another person who committed one of these crimes against a child in New York. That child was essentially blackmailed to give them money via internet, or they would expose that child's video to their parents and family members. Well, that child's parent happened to be an FBI agent. So the FBI kind of took that, traced that information back to Iowa to one of my registrants, and we assisted them in executing a search warrant. Readily apparent after interview and interrogation with this individual, he didn't have the facilities to do that. But he was arrested for other stuff. But I will say, this is something that you really should be watching. I know I'm a hawk like it with my kid. We constantly check the phone, Xbox, computer searches. Kids are sneaky, They don't necessarily want to share with you this stuff because they think they know, they think they know what's going on. They think they know better than mom and dad, right? So you got to be proactive in that. I did want to really harp on that though, because you don't want your child to be one of these unfortunate children victims who is floating around on the internet being circulated by these people. That is one of those kind of like kind of TV show type deals that is actually real. It's very real. Many times we will see the same videos and pictures circulated through arresting different offenders who traffic in that material.
Just real quick.
Oh, sorry.
On the touching problems and some of the stuff like how to talk to your children, I do have some handouts if you guys would like those. Afterwards, I can give those to you. We have some books that are recommended to help you figure out how to talk to your children about it if you're uncomfortable. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that before they leave.
Sure. So this is something obviously you want to be very aware of, and this isn't just for parents, this is for community members. We all see kids walking around, we all see them going to school, we all see those kids who are off to themselves or by themselves, kind of wondering like, hey, where's that kid's parents? Why aren't they being watched, kind of thing. These are things to look for those children, so you can kind of ensure that they don't become a victim. Their age, friendliness, shyness, good manners, curiosity or isolation, living in a single parent home, drug or alcohol abuse by parents, parental illness or emotional unavailability, severe marital conflict or domestic violence in the home, living in a home with a stepfather or mother's boyfriend, a lot, previous abuse, parents who are sexually preoccupied, that use pornography or have it in the home, and inadequate parental supervision. I think as I've gone through that list, we all could probably think of families or people we know that might fit one or more of those. Those are just things that to be aware of. You know, if you see that child with somebody that you don't recognize in the area, you know, it's okay to reach out to us. It's okay to maybe reach out to that child's parents. I mean, I don't think most parents, and you may run into those people who are rude, but it's for that kid, right? I don't think most parents are going to be aggravated with you being like, hey, I saw your child interacting with this person. I just want to make sure you were aware of it. It seemed odd to me. You know, like, oh no, that's so-and-so, they're visiting from out of town. Okay, well, no problem, right? You know, but better that than, okay, I haven't seen my kid for a while. Now, Davenport Police or the Sheriff's Office are going door to door trying to find out who last saw this child. And I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. So with that, I would encourage you guys again, if you have any questions for us, please reach out to us. There's the contact, if you want to leave a contact report or tip, there's a Scott County website with that hyperlink. If you have specific questions about the registry phone number is 563-326-8251.
Get mine.
One more time.
That is 563-326-8251. That one, I would encourage you to save the number for if you're really strongly suspecting a registry violation, because that will go directly to the main phone for the registry. If there's something you have a question about or material like that, we encourage the email contact on the website, and then we'll get back to you. That's all I have for you guys.
If you call and you want to be anonymous, I will
Yes,
respect that as
we
well.
do.
I mean, you may call with something really small and think that it's not a big deal, and then it may turn out to be something, and you can just tell me, you know, I don't want to be a part of this, and I definitely respect that.
We do respect that, absolutely. That's it for this.
Anyone have
Do you have
questions?
questions?
I do.
Yes.
Can you talk about the sex gender breakdown of the registrants that you have?
Currently, are you talking male, female? Like, okay. So of the 479, I believe 26 of them are females. We have moms who sold their children for money, for sex. We
Prostitution.
have prostitution, human trafficking. We have the school teacher, the guidance counselor. And we also have an aunt who did child pornography with her niece.
Thank you.
Those are just kind of,
One of the people related to that has just been picked up again.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
How long does someone stay on the sex registry? Is there a length of time?
Yes, ma'am. So generally, for a first offense, they will be on for 10 years. For each following offense that they are convicted of, it's another 10 years. I would usually, after it's like one or two, they'll special life sentence usually.
if you re-offend, so
Oh,
like
yes.
if you offend and you're on the registration and then you have another victim and you go back to prison, you're on there for life. But if he's talking like violations, so if somebody comes out and they are on a 10-year, and they violate their registration, part of that, and they don't realize this sometimes, is they'll go and they'll think, okay, you know, I'm gonna do 5 days in the county and I'm good. And then when I meet with them, I'm like, you're gonna be on here 10 more years.
Yes.
So 10 more years you get on the registration for failure to register.
Good question. Yes, ma'am.
When you said that they have to come in and change their address, phone numbers, everything, if they've moved and where they've moved to is not a place they should be, what do? They don't have to move again, do they
So-
check with you guys first? Or?
If I am, some of them will call, they have access to the website, on our
The
county
restriction map.
website for the map. A lot of them will just punch the address in and see if it's, restricted or not. Sometimes they don't, they'll move and they'll come in and say, this is our address, and I'll say, you can't live there. And I have to accept it, I can't leave them on the street, so I turn around and I serve them a 30-day notice.
Yes.
And then usually Anthony will go out and do a little home visit to make sure things are okay until they do move. If they do not move, they go to jail.
That'd be for a violation of the 2004 code. Generally, that's enough for most people. We kind of talked that over with the state's attorney, or not state's attorney, county attorney, and determined that, you know, I mean, somebody makes a mistake like that, yes, technically it's on them, but kind of unreasonable to make somebody move like within 5 days from an apartment they just established. So we try to give them that 30 days, like, hey, we will be watching. You've been served this notice. Now, if you're still here at the end of this 30 days, I'm going to take you to jail. And we've served those multiple times. We've actually recently looked into putting a cap at that because there are certain individuals, really one that comes to mind right now, who
He'll
Have-
just move and then
Yes.
if he has another 30 days.
he has
that's
upwards
it.
of,
It just-
what, 7, I think, when I was looking through his file. I'm thinking of,
Not from us.
no, not from us.
Oh,
no,
violations.
like over the, he has like 7 different letters that he's been given over the years from the sheriff's office for like, hey, you can't be at this address, 30 days, you know, leave. So, and at a point, and I think I told him this last time I talked to him, I was like, hey, we're getting to the point where we're not doing any more warnings. We have these tools for you, and you're not using them, so.
One other thing too, and are you familiar with the map at all? Okay, so if you find an offender who lives by you and you pop the address in there and they're in a restricted area and they have the restriction, one thing you can do is look at the website, sex offender website. Under their address will be a date that they registered that address. And so if they've been there a long time and we haven't, like he said, the map is updated every month. So if he moved there in 2018 and there wasn't Susie daycare across the street, he can live there because he was there first. And we get a lot of phone calls. And sometimes I can say, oh, yep, he is in a restricted area. But my map is as of today. So if you do have that and you call in, you'll have to give me a little bit of time so that I can go back and I call our GIS expert and he will look that up to see. But I did, Anthony and I both started in these positions in August of 2020. I did make a list of the people who are living in restricted areas just so I had peace of mind for myself. Why, and so when you look and you see somebody is in a restricted area and they're not supposed to be, just keep in mind that they probably weren't in a restricted area when they moved there.
More or less, they were grandfathered in.
Correct. And also another thing is if somebody is convicted of a crime and they own their home, and they've already lived there, they lived there when they were arrested, they go to prison, they can come back to that home as well,
Yes.
so.
But if they move again after that, cannot come back.
So does the sex offender registry, does it tell you which tier they're in?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
then if they're in a restricted area?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Do you wanna?
So this is what our restriction map looks like that they have access to. Type any address you need in there, and then, so, it's recording. So right there, that area around the courthouse,
Can you zoom in? Scoot that. There you go.
that area around the courthouse there in Davenport PD is mildly unrestricted.
The Shricker is actually not in a restricted area right now.
So the Shricker is actually a little history about that. Like, there's a county attorney letter on that, any place. And the idea was with this building that is essentially right across from both the courthouse and Davenport PD, might be okay to let them live there. So that is actually, it's not entirely sex offenders, but pretty close.
It's probably 25 to 30.
Yes. So many times when we first started, we were kind of trying to vary up the way we did our registry sweeps. I mean, we would get times as Tara and I were in these positions, we would come into contact with registrants who would tell us, "This is not Halloween. You can't check me." You know? So we're like, okay, clearly we need to redo how we're doing this. So we started doing kind of small sweeps to begin with, and then this most recent, like, large multi-agency sweep, we did again at a different time. And we would probably keep doing that because the idea again is we want to ensure compliance. We don't want you knowing when we're coming so you can be like, yeah, I'm here, I live here, you know.
And I actually had people call around Halloween. Are you coming?
Yeah.
Are you coming? No, I'm not coming.
Nope.
I don't want you to know when I'm coming.
Exactly.
So,
But that was one bill. I bring that up to say that as Tara and I were going through it, she's like, we probably need to just devote a sweep to like this building. So we did. At that time, I think we did that building and maybe a few other houses, and the hotels. Yeah, we did hotels too. So yeah, we are very busy in our jobs, as you saw from how many people Tara deals with given month. Also, what probably doesn't get said in that is a lot of those are like just swarms, right? So beginning of the month, you'll have a large group come in. Middle of the month, kind of hits and miss, you know, depending on how DOC lets out or if we have new registrants. But then at end of the month again, they like pile in because they all want to get in before the end of the month. So she's quite busy, and her job isn't just, you know, the registrations and filing and contact with state and other specialists in other counties and across the river. It's also kind of like focusing me, because I kind of run around like a chicken with my head cut off. I have generally anywhere from 10 to 15 active investigations at a time, and then I still will take regular cases. Our CID is like 5 people, so we all still take cases outside of our specialty. But she will refocus me like, hey, this one needs moved out of the list. Yeah, yes, he needs a warrant, you know. So
the only other thing that I forgot to mention, and I spoke to the county attorney today, specifically to ask him, because our numbers had dropped just a little bit. We were over 500 for residents in Scott County. We did have quite a few expire in July, August, and September. But I did check with the county attorney's office. He currently has active 60 cases of sex abuse related charges. 30 of them are warrants. He said about 26, I think, we're just waiting for trial. So it is still happening. It's never going to stop.
tell you,
And
2020
those numbers are going to.
2020 was a bad year for this kind of stuff, like domestics,
I believe that.
sex crimes, because these children, these families are just, they're trapped in their houses, they're not getting out, they're not interacting, and a lot of this toxicity builds up and crimes happen. You had a question, sir?
So why, if they're waiting trial, why are they allowed to be
Because
at
they're not
home?
convicted.
Yeah, they're not convicted yet, there's
They're
pre-trial
still
release.
innocent.
Um,
They'll prove it guilty.
Room. I mean, I will tell you, like, it's all pragmatic, right? Like, nobody wants somebody accused of stuff to just be able to run the street, but number one, we have to respect their rights because they are innocent to prove it guilty. Number two, space in the jail. Number three, when is their trial coming up? How reasonable is it to keep them confined all the way up until that trial?
And then half of them are warrants.
Correct.
And I would say half of those are out of state because they're taken off.
Yes.
They don't want to go to prison.
Same to U.S. Marshals.
They just moved to Texas where we don't.
Can you just touch real briefly, do you have your endorsement with the
Oh,
US
yes.
Marshals and just how you work with
So-
different jurisdictions to
Absolutely.
apprehend these people who flee Davenport or Scott County?
So, recently the sheriff allowed me to join the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, still gaining task force officers in the Scott County area, but we work together a lot with marshals here, marshals in the Central District of Illinois, and like kind of our task force headquarters around the Des Moines area. With that, I have the ability to kind of like fast pass cases from Scott County, all of Scott County, to the Marshal Service. There's normally like kind of like a process that has to go through for a case to be adopted by the Marshal Service. I can speed that up a little bit, quite a bit. So when that happens, that then allows marshals from all over the United States to go after that person, even on a state charge. So if they fled the jurisdiction, they know, hey, this is a state-only warrant or adjacent state-only warrant. I'm fine, 2 states away, 3 states away, and then the marshals come and get them. So it's great. The task force is pretty specific in what it goes after. They were started obviously with violent offenders. It's kind of what everybody knows them for. They go after the gun guys, the gun and drug guys, the murderers, those kind of guys. What a lot of people don't realize, but they are also really famous for, is sex offenders. Everybody knows about John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, and how his son was tragically murdered by a sex offender residing out of his state. The Adam Walsh Act, which encompasses Megan's Law and some other things. Essentially, that is a baby of the Marshals Service. So for sex offenders that are residing out of state or are not registered in the states that they're supposed to be, each district kind of looks at them a little different, but ultimately that can be a case that earns them federal sex offender violation, where they'll get 80% of their time in prison. So that's big for us because that doesn't get them more probation, which is what a lot of the state guys can get, unfortunately. Sometimes that's enough for them, sometimes it isn't. Anyway, go back to the Marshal Service. So there's the violent offenders, sex offenders, and finally, and most recently, missing children investigations that they cover within that task force. And we've got a few, and I think within the last couple of weeks we got one fugitive that was on the run for 4 months, another guy, essentially a murderer, he got voluntary manslaughter, but he had escaped and we got him as well. So we stay busy. There's actually one, I think out of Iowa City, I wasn't able to go to today, but I think they got that guy too. He's been on the run for 3 years. So yeah, it's a great asset to have within Scott County. The goal is to keep growing it so we can bring Davenport, Bettendorf, our surrounding counties into it in the Southern District of Iowa, so that we have those assets around the Quad Cities so that they know I don't just have to jump a bridge and then I'm away from trouble. I'll follow you over the bridge. I'll bring you back. So, awesome asset.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to personally thank Tara and Debbie Johnson for sharing so much great information on the Scott County Sex Offender Registry. You guys making a huge impact on keeping our community safe, and especially our children safe. So thank you for all your hard work. And to our Good Neighbor Project leaders, we're looking forward to 2022, and we'll see you guys again in April. Have a great holidays.